We are live now. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. A very warm welcome to the session 4 of day 5 of the 3rd International Conference and Pop Festival for Youth-led Climate Action 2021. We are delighted to have you all to join us for one of the biggest youth-led events for climate action. My name is Trisha Pathak. I am a pop youth mentor at the Pop Movement. The POP family is excited to welcome you to this session, which will focus on the topic Native American and climate leaders. In this panel, students will hear from two Native American leaders who are advocating for climate justice in their communities. They will discuss their climate stories, share their advocacy initiatives, and provide tools for youth advocates to engage in climate action. I would like to now invite our partner from FXB Climate Advocates, Karina Weston, Program Strategy and Innovation Director, FXB International, to please take over the session as she will be the host for the session. Welcome, Karina.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trisha, and welcome to this panel on Native American youth climate leaders. I'm very privileged to introduce Mindahi Bastida. Mindahi Bastida Munoz is the director of the Original Caretakers Program, Center for Earth Ethics, Union Theological Seminary in New York, and general coordinator of the Otomi-Toltec Regional Council in Mexico, a caretaker of the philosophy and traditions of the Otomi-Toltec peoples, and has been an Otomi-Toltec ritual ceremony officer since 1988. Born in Tultepec, Mexico, he holds a doctorate of rural development from the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana, Mexico. He has written on the relationship between the state and indigenous peoples, intercultural education, collective intellectual property rights, and associated traditional knowledge, among other topics. He's also the president of the Mexico Council of Sustainable Development, a member of the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Biocultural Climate Change Assessment Initiative, and has served as a delegate to several commissions and summits on indigenous rights and the environment, including the 7th World Water Forum in Daegu and Korea in 2015. He was an official delegate of Mexico in the World Summit of Johannesburg in 2002, and the delegate of indigenous peoples at the Earth Summit in Brazil in 1992. He also has worked for the United Nations Environment Program, the Ministry of Environment in Mexico, and the Secretary of the Environment of the Government of the State of Mexico. He has also been the member of the Joint Public Advisory Committee of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation of North America. So it is a privilege to have Mindahi here and turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be in the Pop Festival. And I just want to clarify that I'm currently the director of the Original Nations Program at the Fountain. And this is an organization based in California and also partners with the Center for Sacred Studies. So thank you so much to Dr. Aish Pachauri for organizing all of these beautiful gatherings and conferences around these topics, around climate change. And I just like to begin by saying that I'm from the Otomi-Toltec peoples from central Mexico. And I've been living the past years in the United States, in New York. And I really want to thank Karina for allowing me to share some thoughts about climate action. For the beginning, when I was growing up, I saw many changes in my community. My community is in between Mexico City and Toluca City, one of the major cities in the world. Mexico City is huge, it's like 22 million people. And it's not far from where I was born. It's around 25 miles. And from Toluca is even less, it's around 4 or 5 miles to get to Toluca. So we are in between these big cities. And my community was an island when I was growing up. All the people were living around the wetlands way of living, the modo lacustre way of living. And myself, I saw how things were changing very fast because industries began to arrive in the Toluca Valley, which is also known as the Zambata Valley, the Valley of the Moon. And most of the people were fishermen, and also they used to work with local production around the petates and all the board rushes that we used to use to make rugs and chairs and all of the what it was needed around. And suddenly Mexico City was so thirsty, was very thirsty because it was growing up, that city. So they took our waters and they began to dry up the lake. Because remember where I was born, it was an island surrounded by these wetlands. So what happened was an ecocide. Plus, in the 70s and 80s, many industries began to arrive, so the waters began to be polluted and the lake began to dry up. So it was more than an ecocide, it was also an ethnocide. So I want to bring this concept of ecocide because now that the rise of nature, the rise of Mother Earth are coming to the scene in the international arena, is because the environmental laws that we know, even with the Earth Summit, when we gather over there in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, nation states and even corporations began to see that biodiversity was in danger. But even with those three international agreements, international binding agreements, the CBD, the Convention of Biological Diversity, the Convention of the Certification and the Convention of Climate Change, we are not better. In the global arena, we are worse than 2 or 3 decades ago. So it reflects, the global reflects at the local. Because at the same time the lake was drying up, we began to see how the rains were not regular anymore. And we began to feel those impacts. So what I'm trying to say is that whatever is felt at the global level is also what I was saying is that also that we began to lose the way of living. And I want to bring this concept of the good living, no well-being, good living, because this is the philosophical way of native communities, collective way of thinking. It's not the I, it's the sense of we. And this is very important because when you live with nature, with Mother Earth, it's so different when you live from Mother Earth and from nature. So we want to feel that imposition of colonization way of thinking, this anthropocentric and modern way of thinking was killing not just the material world, but also the spiritual world, the conscious world, how to live in harmony and in balance with nature or with the sacred elements. For example, now we treat water as a resource because it's what we are taught in the schools, in the universities. It's a resource. But in our cosmovision, in our way of thinking, is not a resource. It's a sacred element. You just imagine how you would feel when you were always living with water, surrounded by water, and suddenly the water was corrupted, it was polluted. because of greed, because of these industries. So we began to organize ourselves. But even like that, it was the problem is so huge. Even if we became together with other communities and protesting in a peaceful way, we were even like that always threatened. Well, we couldn't carry out our rituals or our traditional ritual because they would say that we were doing evil things or witchery things, you know? And it's very horrible. It's very horrible when you are not acknowledged, when you are defending life. And that's the reason many environmentalist defenders are being killed. You know, myself, I had my own story about that. I was doing this work, defending the self-determination and autonomy of communities, original peoples in Mexico State. And I was threatened. I had to leave the country. And I had to leave the country with a lot of pain. They were not just threatening me, but my family. I'm not usually say these stories, but I want to put this in motion because we want to speak with truth. Otherwise, we are not going to heal as human beings. So what I'm saying is that in 1996, we were able to carry out the first fiesta, the first gathering among the 4 original peoples in Mexico State, the Fiesta Grande, the big fiesta, to gather and to express ourselves, to defend life. And the lake was almost dry and it was very polluted. And it's the beginning of the biggest river in Mexico, which is the Lerma River, and the most polluted now. It's very sad to say that. So we began to work around this and gather not just elderly people, but young people and children, because this is how we think that we need to come together, all together. You know, the elders cannot do it by themselves. Young people, even if you have a lot of energy, you cannot do it by yourselves. We have to come together, all together. We are family. We are family. So we need to close that gap between the elders and the young people. We need to create this intercultural and intracultural dialogue because we need each other. We are in such a big crisis. This crisis, this civilizational crisis, because the way of thinking that is bringing so much destruction and so much alienation to our minds. So what we are bringing is the good living paradigm, is how to live in harmony with the sacred elements and with nature. Because we understand that territories are sacred. Where you live or where you are living, even if you have moved from one place to another, climate change follows you. Your responsibilities follow you. Not because you go from one place to another, you are exempt to carry out your duties as human being. In this case, we are not the peak of the creation in this thought. We are just another species. Human beings, we are just another species in the world. So let me tell you that that's the reason we call all our relations, because the trees, the animals, the mountains, the volcanoes, the sea, the rivers, they are our relatives. They are our ancestors. they take care of us and we take care of them. That's the reciprocity. And that's a very profound principle that we are bringing from the ancestral wisdom. So now that we have been gathering, and every year, ever since 1996, it was in 1999 in the community in the Chimaliapan Lake that we began to see that the rain was coming back, the water was coming back, because we began to carry out our rituals. And this is a beautiful story, because then we gather some young scientists from the British Columbia University from Canada, and some scientists from Mexico, from the communities as well. We were able to attend the university. So we gather together and we carry out this study to protect the wetlands of the Ciénegas de Lerma, the wetlands of Lerma, which gives birth to the Lerma River. So some years passed by, and in 2022, we were able to present this program. And that year, there was this important mention that the natural protected area of the flora and fauna of Ciénegas de Lerma were federal, acknowledged, recognized. So we did it. We did it. Now they are protected, more than 3,000 hectares, around 6,000 acres. That's the spirit of the river, but also the spirit of our communities. But we had to carry out the studies. We had to organize ourselves through the Otomi Regional Council of Alto Lerma. So this is not for granted. We had to do a lot of work and go against those environmental laws, as is what I wanted to say before, because the environmental laws are very permissive. That's the reason the rights of nature are in the front lines now, are being born as a new regime. So the environmental laws that we know now, they were born mostly from the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. It's where when so many ministries of environment were born. It's not a long time ago. It's not a long time ago, but we haven't seen a lot of positive changes. It's the communities and the organizations that are really persistent when we can carry out some changes. So even like that, when we have now this natural protected area, the institutional change is very slow because the management plan is not in place, and just the communities we are following to protect the wetlands because the water came back. And there's a relationship with the sacred. We acknowledge the Clanchana, the mermaid, as a being. And for us, the river, God's spirit, the wetlands, God's spirit, and the mountains. There is energy everywhere. There is intelligence everywhere in the mineral world, in the natural world, within the animals and within the plants. There's energy, and we are all connected. That's the reason we are family, relatives. So why don't we take care or give care to what gives us life? What do we give in reciprocity? Most of the time, we just take it for granted. But now that we see that these environmental laws are very permissive, we need to push for these rights of nature, rights of Mother Earth. As you know, in some countries, it's been acknowledged. In some constitutions, like in Ecuador and Bolivia, and even in Mexico City, there is an acknowledgement of the new constitution of Mexico City. 3-4 years ago, it was acknowledged that the rights of nature are key to protect life. So we need to move forwards, and we need to move to acknowledge ecocide as a crime. We cannot live anymore with this mess. So for that, ancestral wisdom is key as well. As you know, 80% of the biodiversity in the world is in the indigenous people's territories. But let's not take it for granted. It's a lot of work to carry out and to give care and take care. There is a way of living. It's a way of respect why we are in this world, what kind of creatures we are as human beings. We need to remember why we are here. And we are not here forever. We are not here forever, just for a while. And what are we delivering to the future generations? And what kind of future generations we are delivering to the world, to this Mother Earth? We have a lot of work to do together. That's the reason we are calling for unification process. Well, maybe there is some other comments and the other participant is around. I don't want to take a lot of time. I'm also respectful about this lineage.
Thank you so much, Mindahi. That was very inspiring and very important for us to learn about and to understand. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Sam Schimel, and then after Sam speaks, we'll open up for question and answers from the audience. Sam is St. Lawrence Island, Siberian Yupik and Kenaitze Indian from Alaska. Growing up subsistence hunting and fishing, Sam has experienced firsthand how climate change impacts Arctic communities. Sam was appointed by Governor Bill Walker to serve on the state of Alaska's Climate Action Leadership Team. He's a representative on the National Congress of American Indians Climate Action Task Force and the 2020-2021 National Tribal Climate Change Summit. Sam is the Arctic Youth Ambassador for 2020 to 2021 for the state of Alaska and is the vice chair of the Arctic Youth Network. He developed and was the lead organizer for the grassroots indigenous project Operation Fish Drop, which addressed food and cultural insecurity during the COVID pandemic. He will be a senior at Stanford in the fall. Thank you so much, Sam, for joining us. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Schimmel, and thank you, Karina, for the kind introduction. I apologize for coming in a little bit late. Here in rural Alaska, we have troubles with our internet. One of the things that makes our community special, I guess. I grew up in Gamble, which is a small community out in the middle of the Bering Sea. If any of you watching have seen Deadliest Catch, I think is what it's called. That show is filmed in the waters by our island. I grew up in Gamble where we hunted pretty much everything that we ate. If it ended up on your table, it was more than likely that you or one of your uncles or one of your aunties either gathered it or caught it. And I can remember as a little kid going seal hunting with my uncles and going to the big icebergs and ice floes that were around our island in the springtime, because that's when we would hunt. And being struck by the immutability of sea ice, thinking that the sea ice that surrounded our island that we subsisted off of and have subsisted off of for tens of thousands of years was something more powerful than the ocean itself, something that would never go away, something that could be constant. that sea ice that had been there for tens of thousands of years, that sea ice that our traditions and our culture have grown up around, that sea ice that our first teachings are rooted in, now no longer comes down to our island. Climate change has made it so that our weather patterns have changed, that our migration routes of the animals that we rely on for food have changed. I remember as a little boy, my uncle Akuski was the weather person for our village. He knew the traditional ways of reading weather in our community. And towards the end of his life, we would always go to him before we went out hunting or before we went out in boats. And we'd ask him, Akuski, where should we go? Should we go north? Should we go south? Where should we go? And towards the end of his life, he would say, I can't read our weather anymore. Our traditions have not kept up with our weather patterns. Our earth is faster now. He didn't mean that the earth was spinning faster now. He meant that the patterns of weather that he had learned as a boy were no longer present. That the patterns of weather that our traditions and our culture were based around were changing in ways that we could not keep up with. And so I think a lot of times we think of climate change as a polar bear on a piece of ice. We think of climate change as maybe rising sea levels. Maybe we think about it in terms of numbers. Maybe we think about it in terms of the idea that climate change is having more than 400 parts per million of soluble carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's not the case for communities like ours. Climate change isn't just a number. Climate change isn't just a climate change isn't just a statistic. What it looks like for our community is not being able to eat. In years past, when our walrus harvests have been bad, the USDA has had to fly in things like canned salmon into villages across Alaska, because people were going hungry because we were not able to practice our subsistence ways of life. And when we're not able to practice our subsistence ways of life, we're not able to practice our culture. We're not able to use our language in the same way. We're not able to build community in the same way. We're not able to engage with our relatives in the same way. And so that leads to different things. And one of those things is a lack of connection to community. You're seeing more and more as climate change progresses and further impacts the ability to practice culture, communities becoming disconnected from themselves. Youth getting more and more involved with drugs, more involved with alcoholism, higher rates of recidivism inside of schools. You're seeing the erosion of the foundation of a community. Climate change doesn't just mean that the ice is melting. It also means that the communities that are faced with it are being driven into the ground. There's this term, solastalgia. We all know what nostalgia means. It's missing something that we no longer have. Solastalgia is sitting in one place and missing that same place, but watching it change over time. And this kind of grief is ever present in our Indigenous communities. There is trauma associated with watching the place that you have grown up in, your grandmother has grown up in, her grandmother has grown up in, changing in ways where it's no longer possible to live there. We're watching as villages like Schimel are having to be moved. You're seeing that places where our traditional hunting and fishing once took place can no longer take place. You're seeing where communities are in danger where they are. In years past, we've had ice storms around our island that will throw 30-foot chunks of ice the size of school buses, 100 or 200 feet up onto the shore. That's not safe. And you're watching as our environment is changing in ways that our traditions and our knowledges are not prepared for. This, as I said, creates food insecurity. This creates a lack of connection to community. This creates poor mental health outcomes. This means that our communities are becoming disconnected from the soul of our community, which is our first teachings and our traditions. And so in working around climate change, it's important that we find ways not only to mitigate the causes of it, but to adapt to the effects of it. While sitting on the climate action leadership team under Governor Walker, that was something that was incredibly important. Here in Alaska, we have over 200 remote communities that rely on themselves, really, their subsistence communities. And we couldn't do a one-size-fits-all solution. We couldn't say, hey, everybody, we're just going to move you. That doesn't work. And so we had to come up with a plan for each of these villages on how we're going to support their adaptation to changing weather patterns, how we're going to support their continued existence in the places that they've existed forever. And so I ask all of you in your climate efforts and in your climate action to work directly with communities, ask them what they want, and figure out how they can adapt to climate change while also mitigating the impacts or mitigating the causes of it. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. So now we'll open up for questions. I'm going to read a questions from the chat box for Mindahi, and then I'll pose a question to Sam unless someone types in another. So there's a question that says, thank you so much for your message. I'm Mexican too, and so painful to know that the lives of our environmental defenders are in danger. You're right about the environmental regulations. They're so old. How can Mexican youth change that? Thank you.
Yes, I think in a democratic country, there is a chance for the youth to be representatives at the local and national level. It's just that they need to take the agenda about this nature, rights on nature, and how these norms and regulations can really protect life. Because we are thinking about biocultural heritage, biocultural diversity that we have in our territories, in all countries around the world. But especially in Mexico, Mexico is the second biocultural richest country in the world because of the number of languages spoken and because of the biodiversity that is in the territory. But there is no public policies to protect biodiversity and protect biocultural diversity. So we need really to bring the young voices to the decision-taking processes, to the Senate, to the Congress, local and federal Congress. So we need to embark, even if you don't like political parties, we could change that narrative in doing the right things, in raising our voices and raising the kind of life that we want. So we need to really participate in a participatory democracy where we really have a place and a voice and an action to take. Because this is the time and the time is now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mindahi, for that answer. I think, that applies to Mexico and anywhere else, really using the democratic process for youth to engage and advocate for the change. And a question for Sam. I wanted to know, what advice would you give young people who are just starting out in climate advocacy?
Yeah, I think climate action, climate advocacy can seem daunting We have problems that are larger than any one community, larger than any one country that we're facing. The reality of climate change is that if we don't tackle it as a collective, we won't get very far. That being said, changes can be made on the small level. Changes can be made on the local, the state, the regional level pretty easily. And so if you're interested in getting involved with climate change, certainly I sit as the vice chair of something called the Arctic Youth Network. It's a group that's dedicated to building capacity for those in the Arctic to advocate on behalf of the Arctic. We're a nonprofit based in Canada. And so if you're around or in the subarctic, definitely check out the arcticyouth.network.com or ayn.org. But beyond that, look to your communities. If you have an idea, bring it to the table and say, hey, this is what I've been thinking about. If you don't, go to our communities and ask, what can we do to help? How can we help? And don't be afraid either. There is, we're fortunate here, certainly in the United States, that advocacy is very rarely met with violence. And so if you just invite people to a casual conversation around what you're hoping to do, oftentimes you can develop an idea together. And it's those co-developed ideas that will really fly. So build partnerships, build coalitions, back your ideas, and reach out to local communities to see if you can get buy-in from that.
Thank you, Sam. What about Mindahi? What advice would you give to young people who are just starting out?
Well, I think we have to come with like-minded objectives, because this is the chance for us to do something in our lives. So there's nothing so small that can make a change. So even if you have a small participation, it's going to grow little by example. So I would suggest that we come together with other friends and like-minded people to really change this way of living that is destructing Mother Earth and nature. It's destructing our lives. It's destructing the medicine and natural medicine and the food that we eat. We deserve other way of living. We deserve the good living. And the good living paradigm is just to have access to clean water, clean air, to have access to clean soils and clean energies. So let's begin for organizing ourselves and to do little things in our houses, in our homes, in our places where we go, to be responsible for what we eat, for what we say, for what we feel, and for what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. So I hear both of you saying very similar things, that really change starts within us, that individual actions matter, but individual actions and bring other people along to form a strong sense of community to create change. That is a really powerful message. We would love to take more questions from the audience. Is there any other questions? One of the, I'll just ask one more question, and I think you've laid it out. Oh, there's a question from Michelle. How can youth bring the reality and concept of sacred elements into the mainstream? That's a great question. Thank you for both of you. So, but we'll start with Mindahi.
Yeah, in many countries like in New Zealand or Colombia or Ecuador or many other countries around the world, there's an acknowledgement of the through the rights of nature, acknowledgement of the rivers and some water bodies as subject of rights. So if we have special place like a sacred site or a river or a mountain that is very valuable and is very sacred to the peoples and to the environment and to the biocultural diversity. We could organize ourselves to defend and ask really to acknowledge these rivers with the rights of nature and subjects of rights, so they can be defended by people. Nature can speak through people who are in charge of those places as caretakers, as caregivers. And I think we need also to be prepared for this new regime that we need this kind of lawyers that really defend life. So let's learn from other places how they are doing around defending these sacred places, these body waters. And there are many examples around the world now. So that's the way we can really protect the sacred and protect life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sam?
I think being very intentional about what we share with the public. In our communities, there's certain sacred things that we do not share. There's certain sacred things that are not for anybody other than our community. And so I think being very conscious of that is important when trying to bring elements of sacred things into the mainstream. But on that question, I think there is, we're in a moment today, at least in America, where there is an effort to defend the sacred, to defend the meaningful things in our communities, the most meaningful things in our communities. And so certainly as a tool, we can leverage the idea of sacred to further protect our resources and our communities. But I think being very intentional about how and when to bring that forward into the mainstream and to make sure that the community is behind it.
Thank you so much to both of you for those incredible answers. And one last question for both of you as well. As we emerge from the COVID pandemic, what are some lessons that you think we can take away to inform youth climate advocacy work? Thank you.
Well, I think one of the greatest things to come out of this COVID pandemic, and there weren't many, but one of the greatest things that we've kind of mastered over the last year and 3 months is the ability to organize over Zoom. Previously, if we had wanted to do one of these conferences, we would have had to be flown in, me from Alaska, others from other places. It would have been incredibly expensive and there wouldn't have been that many. There wouldn't have been as large of an audience able to view it. And so what we've been able to do is expand our networks, not only across the country, but across the world. So that way we can pick up the phone and meet with each other and kind of have these kinds of conversations over Zoom. That's a major value add in terms of advocacy, in terms of meetings. Right now, I lead up the National Tribal Climate Leadership Summit's youth planning team, where we have over 400 different tribal communities represented in making a cohesive and coherent tribal voice on climate action. That wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for using Zoom. We were going to do it in person, and we realized that it really doesn't work. You don't have enough time, you don't have enough stuff. So really, one of the things that is a bonus to come out of the pandemic, and that's a value add and that's a learn, is how to use these types of platforms to have these kinds of conversations. Another piece that is come out of the pandemic in terms of climate action is we know what we can do. If we decide to cut our emissions and cut everything, we know what we can do. We kind of have a gold standard set for how that can happen. And so I think those are really two key pieces of two positives that have come out of the last year and a little bit.
Thank you, Sam. That's really powerful and really important to remember and focus on the positive and use that to build on that to for more effective action. Thank you. Mindahi?
Yes, thank you for this question. There are many things to say, but I'd like just to say that this pandemic, this tiny being, is a teacher, and the main teachings is that we are not so important, not so big as we thought. We are very vulnerable, and even the economic systems are in danger now. Along with that, we are seeing that we can live with less. We can work from home as well. That's another thing. We don't have to go to an office to carry out the work we can do from home. And actually, there is a reconnection with nature in many cases, because there is more time to be with family, there is more time to be with our communities. And also, yes, I do agree with Samuel about these online gatherings that really help sometimes to spread the word and to spread our intentions. And but I really like to bring back one thing, that even if we have these technologies like the Zoom and on other platforms, for us it's not what we want. Really, it's important to see each other face to face. It's very important. So let's look for some ways to really to carry out these gatherings, because they are important to raise consciousness and to really meet each other. So let's not live faster, not slower than the cycles of nature. And this being, this virus is a blessing in some way, because it's teaching us how to live again in a simple way. And this is not going to be the last one. Many lessons are coming, because we have been misbehaving so much as human beings. So we need just to remember our place in the world. So thanks for this COVID, because it's telling us how to live in dignity, in peace, in harmony with nature. If we want to listen, if we want to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such inspiring and impactful presentations, and your experiences really helped to inform and inspire all of us. It was wonderful. Thank you. And I think I really like, Mindahi's message that the pandemic, in spite of, a lot of the devastation, can be a blessing, right? To teach us many important lessons and how we live. And I think hopefully, in what Sam said as well, these are things that we can take away, that young people can take away for, sense of urgency around climate action, but at the same time, a sense of pace and intentionality. So that's really important. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ash to say a few closing words.
Thank you so much. I just want to say how much respect I have for your wisdom and your values. And I deeply appreciate your sharing them with us, sharing personal stories and narratives and inspiring us with your words and your action. And I would just want to say that it's very, very important that we stay close to the wisdom which has guided us over so many centuries. And one of the biggest issues that we face today is the departure from those values and from that wisdom. And so I just want to say it's very important that we recognize our roots, and also that like you highlighted and underscored, we must understand we need to be one with nature, and that harmony needs to be restored. We can only make progress if we do this, and we do this together, and we do it collectively, and we are a universal family. For us to reiterate those values and to live those values are really our only way forward. And as you rightly pointed out, and I appreciate the very important questions that have been brought up, COVID has presented us with opportunities to learn, and it's now up to us to embrace those opportunities and those lessons and move forward with a greater sense of consciousness, oneness, and also the respect that we definitely owe nature. And so and this is not because nature needs us, it's because we our own futures are dependent on it. And also I think the important thing is to understand that we need to be able to achieve harmony with all species we are so blessed to share this planet with. So I just want to say thank you once again. Your wisdom is something we deeply and profoundly respect. We love your voices and values, and we are led by that light and the guidance that you share. I think it's very important that we also understand that there's no way we can actually make and or call progress unless we move together in an inclusive and equitable and respectful manner. So I just want to say this has been a very, very, very important discussion. I deeply appreciate this opportunity to come together. Thank you, Mindahi. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Karina. Thank you, the entire family that we are so blessed to be together with here today. Your love and your light and your leadership will take us forward, and we can do it only if we can hold hands and take it forward together. So thank you so very much once again. And again, I just want to say that the time is now, and you've brought that up. So I just want to say, let's make it happen and do it together from this moment on. And I say that with my heart, and I embrace you with my heart, and with all my love and prayers always. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pachauri. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share with you and to learn.
Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samuel.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very much.
Mindahi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brother
Thank you,
Abasi.
Mindahi.
Thank you for your teaching.
Love and blessings to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Mindahi, and thank you, Sam. Sam, I would like to invite you for a session that we have tomorrow, which is called the Free Climate Aid Youth Forum. We would love to have you part of that session, as we are inviting and having an initiative with the young people in partnership with Climate Aid Forum, where we'll be talking about challenges that the youth face, and especially if you will bring out your perspective on the Native Americans and the communities, that would be really, really great. I will definitely send you the details via email, and if you have time, please do join us.
Yes, of course. I will make every effort I can.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Sam. Thank you. With that, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to all our experts who joined us and to the audiences for being so participative. We hope to see you in the next session for the day, the next session is a project presentation sessions, followed by climate solution, a keynote address. Then again, we have project presentations, and then we have a workshop on climate advocacy training by CCL, Citizen Climate Lobby, followed by a youth panel on climate justice. So would love to have you participate in the next 5 sessions of the day. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll start with the next session in an hour. So we'll see you then on the same link. Thank you.